Hello, welcome to Coach K's Corner. I'm Dave Hilbert, IPFW Sports Information Director. I think you guys started off last week with a big win at Kentucky Wesleyan. What was your game plan going in?
Well, first of all, to win a ball game. Secondly, we just wanted to go in and play some real hard-nosed man-to-man defense. We didn't feel that they had the outside game, especially from three-point range, that we've had in the past with some of our opponents. So we were going to pack it in just a little bit, put some pressure on the passing, but certainly not extend ourselves out to three-point range as much. We did mix it up a little bit. We started out using a little bit of what we call a matchup zone with a chaser. And they had one outside shooter, their leading scorer. In fact, I believe we held to 6 points that evening. So that was effective for us, but some other people started getting hot from the perimeter, and we went back to our man-to-man, and that seemed to be effective the rest of the game.
Did you have to do anything, make any changes during the game?
Well, other than just switching up our defenses, and then at halftime, of course, we had a 7-point deficit, and it was beginning to become quite a rough game, and we decided at halftime that we would extend our defense a little bit more and just apply a little more pressure. We did come out second half with a full-court man-to-man press, and we felt that tied the ball game up for us, and then we went up by 9 points and led the rest of the game and won by 4.
What were some of the key turning points in the game? Because like you said, it was close most of the first half, and you guys started to pull away in the second half.
Well, by applying our man-to-man full-court pressure, we were able to create some turnovers that resulted in some layups for us, and then Dawn Dressler started to do quite well and was able to get some good backside rebounds and some putbacks, and we got a few backdoor cuts and some layups in there. Jenny Newhard came to life for us again toward the end of the game and stuck a couple key jumpers for us that kept the lead for us.
Now the game, like most of your games this year, was low scoring. 61-57 was the final. Is that low scoring in most of your games? Is that by design?
Well, somewhat. You try to score as many points as you can, but one thing that we focus on a great deal is that we have to be patient with our offense. We have to execute very well. We have to set good picks to get the good shot. We try to slow other teams down as well. Teams that have maybe 14 people on the bench and can just keep putting in fresh players. We can't keep up with that because we don't have the numbers on the bench. And it is a game plan of ours to try to control the tempo of the game, and as a result, we don't score as many points, and neither does our opponent.
Now, what are some of the things you do to keep the score low?
Well, basically just being patient with our offense. Oftentimes, I recall with Northern Kentucky when we had a 14-point lead, we wanted to take care of the basketball and use as much of the clock as we could. So we try to work the 30-second clock down and still, get a good shot if we can.
Now, when you get a team or an opponent that's playing an up-tempo game, how does that affect your strategy going in to play more of the slow-down style, or does it?
Well, how does it affect them?
Or you
us.
or them?
Well, we try to slow them down. Our first strategy is, of course, to put a lot of pressure on their rebounder so they don't get the quick outlet pass, and then to pick up the person that they're looking to outlet it to. Usually have a point guard or a two guard they're looking to get the ball to run their break. So we'll go ahead and apply some pressure there, and everyone else will just get back in the paint and match up with their players and go from there. It helps us, as I said, in a way to get control of the tempo, to take some things away that our opponent wants, especially the running game, and for us to keep things under control offensively and work for the good shot.
Now, in a game like that, is it easier for a team that normally plays a slower style to pick up and run a little more, or is it or the other way around for a run and gun team to slow things down and control it a little more? Which do you think is easier to do? Well,
I think whatever's part of your game when you have to make an adjustment, whether you're a running team and have to slow down, or whether you're a slow type, bring the ball up the court team, and then have to speed it up. I think either time that you have to change your style of play, that it does, cause maybe a little chaos for you.
But do you think one is easier to do than the other, or not?
Well, it's probably easier to pick things up than to slow it down.
Okay. Is there any preference? Do you have any preference as to what style to play? If you could pick your own team, or if you're starting from scratch, do you have a style of play that you prefer to coach?
Well, I like the way that we approach it. It's not that we're always able to get what we want. I definitely like to work for the good shot, and my philosophy is to look for the fast break, try to get the layup if you can, but if we don't have the uncontested shot, the easier shot, we will set the offense up and use the clock. It discourages me when we bring the ball down and if their pressure forces us into taking a 15, 16-foot jump shot and then no offensive boards and it goes the other way. You've used about 10 seconds on your shot clock and they have the basketball. So that's something we try to avoid, is allowing opponents to rush us into a quick shot that's not a high percentage shot.
Now, last year you guys played more of an up-tempo game. Have the players on this year's team, has there been any problem for them adjusting to the style this year?
Well, what I like to do too, Dave, is just take what we have personnel-wise and make the most of it. Last year, I guess maybe in our last 6 games with Jamie LaRue as our point guard, we didn't push the ball up court as much. And maybe that was to our advantage. We reduced the turnovers and came out on top in those 6 ball games. And that's my key focus, reducing the turnovers. Bring the ball up this court as fast as we can under control with what we have to work with personnel-wise.
So do you think that last year, with that slowing the game down a little, did that help going into this year with a lot of those players coming back?
I think it had a lot to do with it. And when I came in last year as a first-year coach, something that I needed to kind of discipline the team with was running an offense. They were used to 1 pass, 2 passes, shoot the basketball, and really not get after the boards. You know, my philosophy is to run a little more offense and work for the better shot.
Now, one player you mentioned before was Jenny Newhart. She had an outstanding game against Wesleyan, a lot of rebounds, a lot of points off the bench. Now, she's come along, it seems, during the year, didn't get a whole lot of playing time first couple of games. How would you assess her progress to this point?
Well, I'm very pleased with Jenny and what she's done for us as a freshman. I would have to say that both she and Lindy have a little bit of pressure on them as freshmen to come in and contribute for us right away. They certainly, I don't feel, have the freshman nerves or freshman anxieties about coming in off the bench. They come in and go after it just like a veteran. Of course, they have the mistakes that they make, the freshman mistakes that they're learning from, and we kind of tease as a team that they are no longer freshmen, that they're sophomores for us, along with Kim McDonald. And they just work real hard every day to improve, and when they come in, they contribute as much as they can. And I would say that they've each had their turn at having outstanding games. Lindy opened the season with a game high of 27 points at Taylor. Jenny scored 24 points on the road for us at the Edwardsville tournament. So they've taken their turns in scoring well for us and getting the rebounds, the steals. Lindy helps us out a great deal in the ball handling department and getting the assists, getting the ball inside to the post players.
How important is the confidence, especially for a freshman, to come out in the first couple of games and really play well? Like you said, Lindy Jones had, 27 in the first game, and Jenny Newhart had a big night, I think 5th or 6th game of the year. How important is that as the season goes on?
I don't know if it's a matter of confidence or not. You know, over the years you see outstanding freshmen come in and, having been such a solid ball player in high school and maybe have or show a little difficulty adjusting to the college game. And I think it's just a matter of just that, learning the college game. I don't know that it's a matter of lack of confidence. Our freshmen certainly do not lack the confidence. They're more than willing to get in and in the game and get after it.
Now, with Jenny Newhart, has it helped her having some veteran big players on the team with like Michelle and Kim and even Pam during the early portion of practice?
Oh, anytime you have an upperclassman practicing daily against a freshman, they certainly are going to pick up different things. I think Jenny has improved her game a great deal since I've watched her in high school, and I think she's going to improve for us even more so.
Now, in the last couple of games, Dawn Dressler's also picked up her scoring quite a bit. Is that something you expect to continue?
We hope so. Dawn is our only returning starter from last year. Amy Hogan started a few times for us last year, and by the way, she had an outstanding game at Kentucky Wesleyan. She came in and was 4 of 6 from the field for us and did quite well. But Dawn is someone who really stands out in just about all areas, and I do emphasize that a great deal with our team, that Dawn, being 5'8", playing the guard forward spot, is our leading rebounder. Dawn is everywhere. One game she had 4 block shots and 4 assists and 8 or 9 rebounds, 20 points. She was about 8 or 9 from the free throw line. And they do key in on her. Most definitely, our opponents do key in on her. But we have other people, contributing as well. Kim Recker and Michelle Conley have been in double figures, and don't want to overlook Amy Perkins, our last game out, as our point guard, who's only been averaging about 5-6 points a game. Had a game high our career high of 16 points against Southern Indiana this past weekend.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break. Then we'll take a look at last week's Southern Indiana game, and then take a look ahead at this week's games.
Catch all the action of top-ranked men's volleyball this weekend at IPFW. Tickets available at all Ticketmaster locations or call 481-6643.
This is the increasingly competitive world we live in, and this is the country we want ahead of the competition. These are the people we'll be depending on to keep this country ahead of the competition. These are the colleges and universities we're relying on for the people we're depending on to keep this country ahead of the competition. So if you want America to stay #1 in the world, do something about it. Give to the college of your choice.
You were the first in this family to get into college.
I'm so proud of you.
I can't go, can I? Just can't afford to send you.
I didn't mean to let you down.
I understand. Maybe next year. Maybe.
Hard-working students deserve a chance. Please, support the United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Lies beget lies.
God, you sound like Mother. Well, she happens to be right. Lying is a vicious circle, and there's no way out except to tell the truth. It's not so easy this time, Marie. If I tell you, it's just gonna make you mad.
1 out of every 5 people who try cocaine get hooked. But that's not your problem. Or is it?
Catch all the action of top-ranked men's volleyball this weekend at IPFW. Tickets available at all Ticketmaster locations or call 481-6643.
Welcome back to Coach Gay's Corner. Now on Saturday you guys played down at the University of Southern Indiana, kind of one of the surprising teams in the league this year. I wasn't at the game. What happened in that game? Another close game, but this time a loss.
Yes, even though the score seemed close toward the end, it really was indicative of the entire game. We trailed by as many as 14 points and oftentimes 8 or 9 throughout the game. Southern Indiana is a much improved team, you know, with the new coach as of last year. Chancellor Dugan's done a great job of bringing in a few Division I transfers and also a few junior college transfers, so they really are an entirely different team. I would have to say that overall they're probably one of the best balanced teams in the league. They have 3 outstanding three-point shooters, and by outstanding I'm talking high 40s and 50% from three-point range. And you have to extend your defense on those kids, and as soon as you do that, you know, they have a couple key post players that they're looking to get the ball inside, and their leading scorer that evening was a post player with 15 points. So we did hold their leading scorer, averaging 20 points a game, to 11 points. I felt good about that, but they play 14 people. It's kind of revolving substitution, and they full court press for 40 minutes. It's a very high pressure, in your face, very physical defense, and as a result they have key people foul out toward the end of the game, which allowed us to come back into the game. We had 2 kids foul the game ourselves toward the end and did apply some pressure and made some key baskets, and I made some free throws when we needed to, and then the kids did hang in there and bring us back to just a 6-point deficit. But they're a good ball club.
Now, that was, like you said, I think you mentioned it was a very physical game. I think USI had 32 fouls, and we had close to 30. Does that work for you or against you, that type of game?
I think if you have the depth, it certainly can work for you. You know, I was expecting that type of game. Last year we took 50 free throws against USI, and that is basically their strategy, to play a lot of people, to play very physical, to sacrifice the fact that some of you may foul out, but with hopes that you'll have a big enough lead or that the game will be in your favor, and by the time that happens, there's no concern as far as fouling out certain people.
Now you mentioned Amy Perkins, your point guard, had 16 points, which was a career high. She's had double figures 2 of the last 3 games. Is that something you've made a point of trying to get more points out of your point guard, or?
We have talked about that a great deal. Amy has been a player in the past who She's very unselfish, and her main concern, she feels, in her job as a point guard, is to get the ball, inside to the post people and to get the assist that a point guard needs to get. But we've been talking to her more so about looking to be an offensive threat for us, because too often some of our opponents have been sagging off of her and helping out, plugging up the paint inside and taking away our inside game. So we've asked Amy to look for the shorter range shots. She's not a long range outside shooter, and she's a very good driver. I tell Amy anytime we get the ball reversed to her side when we swing the ball, and she pops out off the baseline pick to look to take the ball to the hole if it's there, look for the short jumper if it's there, and she's done that for us. And surprisingly enough, different times she has come up with a number of rebounds and has been able to get a few putbacks here and there.
Now, she's played the whole 40 minutes, like both games last weekend. She's averaging close to 35 minutes a game. Is she going to have to continue that during the year, or are you going to look to give her a little bit of rest from time to time?
It's very possible. I've talked to her about that. She claims that she feels very good being out there for 40 minutes and doesn't seem to be exhausted whatsoever. She doesn't show fatigue on the court. That's one thing about Amy Perkins. She is in excellent condition, and she does not show fatigue out there. So I tell my players, I want you to play hard, and when you need to come out, I want you to let me know, and I want you to play so hard that you have to come out. Amy doesn't seem to show the fatigue. It's very possible that she'll have to continue to play that number of minutes throughout the season.
Now, when she would have to come out of the game, who do you look at as taking over for her position?
Well, generally what we do, if Amy's not in the game, we have a two-guard offense that we run, and in doing that, we usually have Lindy Jones and Amy Hogan at top. To run. Working together is not as much pressure for the both of them. Dawn Dressler certainly has to help out in bringing the ball up against the full court pressure. Even when Amy Perkins is in, Dawn Dressler is a key player for us to help handle the pressure and handling the basketball.
Now, when you came into the season, the point guard, well, I guess like a lot of the positions, was kind of a question mark because Amy hadn't played a whole lot the last couple of years. How would you, how satisfied are you with her play to this point?
I think she's done an outstanding job, and she's had to deal with a lot of pressure against some very good ball clubs, and she hasn't folded us on us yet, and I don't think that she will. She's a real hard-nosed kid, and she's going to get out there. She loves the game of basketball, and she really doesn't allow anyone to intimidate her. So I've been real pleased with her so far.
Now, this week you've got two games. We play St. Francis tonight, and then Saturday you're at Ashland. We talked before the show. You haven't had a chance to see St. Francis, but a couple of your assistants have. What kind of style of play do you look for from St. Francis?
Well, we have scouted them several times. They have a good inside game. They have a good outside shooter, so we are going to have to extend our defense a little bit on a few of their perimeter shooters, particularly the three-point shooter. I look for a well-balanced scoring team. Everyone scores on the team. They don't have someone who stands out with 25 points, much like us. They do hit the offensive boards extremely well. A lot of the same things that we've dealt with here in the past. They're going to apply some full court pressure on us, which we've had a great deal of in the past, and play a lot of people. And that's one thing they have an advantage over us, is that they do have a little more depth, and they are going to play a lot of people tonight.
Now, being a local team is St. Francis. I believe this is the first time in 5 years that IPFW, the women, have played them. Are you likely to renew that series more often, do you think?
I believe so. I've spoken with Larry Wessendorf over at St. Francis, and we both agreed to at least play a home-and-home, maybe every other year or so. But we think it's good for the community and good for the colleges both to get together and to play each other now and then, but probably not annually.
Now that you guys are have started the conference season, you're on your usually normal Thursday, Saturday schedule. Does it kind of mess your routine at all, having a game on a Tuesday or a game other than on a Thursday or Saturday night?
There is one advantage in playing a little bit earlier here on Tuesday. With a Thursday-Saturday game, it doesn't give you a great deal of time to prepare for the Saturday's game. You have that one day in between, and you're ready to go with the next opponent. By having a game on Tuesday, I'm hoping that we'll have a little more time to prepare for Ashland. And I plan on giving the girls a day off tomorrow just to rest, because we've been through a lot. It's been a physical weekend, and long travel and so forth that was involved with our trip.
Okay, now Saturday you guys go to Ashland. It's a team that beat twice last year. Last couple of years they've finished about middle of the pack in the GLVC. What do you expect to see out of Ashland?
I did see them play against Northern Kentucky this year, and they have just about everyone back from last year. They're a much improved basketball team, and they're going to be very much like Southern Indiana. They have a good inside game, a very good outside game, and they're going to play a lot of people, and they're going to play very physical, aggressive, man-to-man defense. However, I would not be surprised if they used a little zone against us. They did do that against Northern Kentucky, and it was effective. And knowing that we don't have a real good perimeter game, it's something that they may key in on.
Now, you said they play the style, a style similar to USI, so are there going to be anything different about your approach to the game?
Well, probably not. In fact, Ashland played USI on Thursday of last week at USI and lost by 19 points. It's one thing that's a little bit encouraging for us. However, they created 36 turnovers for Southern Indiana. Just did not shoot well from the field. So I think it all depends, too, on how well they're shooting that evening.
Now, this is something we talked about earlier in the year with the team being a little bit shorthanded, only 9 healthy players. I know early in the year you said that it hadn't been a big factor as far as fatigue, but now that you've gotten into the conference game, played a few games, have you seen it take its toll at all?
I think it definitely has at times. A Saturday is certainly a game where endurance was a factor for us. I think in addition to that, though, just traveling, the traveling that we did on Wednesday and then playing a very physical game on Thursday. We had a very light practice on Friday and then playing the game on Saturday, which was very physical. In fact, we played in the afternoon, so we didn't have as much recovery time as we're used to having. I think in conference play, to answer your question, yes, I think it has made a difference. But it's something that we're keeping an eye on, and as a coach, I'm trying to make sure that we're getting the proper rest and having certain practices maybe a little lighter than others or even shorter than others to make sure that we get the proper amount of rest time.
And do you think your opponents sometimes might play a more physical game knowing that you've got a shorthanded team?
They may attempt to do that, and that goes back to our philosophy of slowing the tempo up and taking care of the basketball and making them play defense a little bit longer.
Okay, now one interesting thing this year, at least so far, you have a better record away from home than you do at home, and you've got a road game coming up Saturday. Is that just a coincidence, or are there any reasons you can think of why that might be true? Is it the schedule, or?
Oh, I think it probably has something to do with family in the stands. The Newharts claim that Jenny plays better when she's not in front of her relatives. I really don't have the answer for that. I really don't. You would think home court advantage would be what you'd be looking for. So.
What are some of the toughest things about playing on the road? I know, for example, some things might be a little bit different in a women's game. Kentucky Wesleyan was a good example. The men's game, they had about 4,000 people. People are screaming and yelling. The game's on TV. For the women's game, at least at Wesleyan's place, they only had about 200 people. And the gym was silent. Is that almost more of a disadvantage? It kind of is. I mean, it's not something you're used to. I mean, here at our place, you have a little bit. The crowds aren't huge, but they tend to be somewhat loud. Is it almost distracting to have a quiet crowd?
Oh, maybe that's the answer. Maybe they can hear my instruction from the bench because it's so quiet. That's something that, to be very honest with you, I didn't even notice. The quiet gym at Wesleyan. Didn't notice that at all. I don't think that that's a factor for us as far as noise at the basketball game.
What are some of the other things that make it tough to play on the road? I mean, not just this year, but in general.
Oh, just being in a foreign gym, perhaps, but probably the number one answer to that would be just being out of routine and the traveling and the times that we have to eat during the day.
Okay, now this year, I think you mentioned this earlier, you've got an extremely balanced offense. You've got 4 players averaging between 10 and 12 points a game. Is that something you thought would be the case before the season started?
Most definitely. I did have high expectations for Pam Edwards coming back as the 4th leading scorer in the conference, and with Lisa Miller being one of them, that put her 3rd. So I did expect, some high numbers from her, both on the boards and in scoring. But I did hope that our team would be a very balanced scoring team this year, that our opponents wouldn't be able to focus on 1 or 2 people, that everyone would contribute, and I felt that that's what we have to be successful this year.
Are there any disadvantages to that, not having the one big scoring threat?
I don't know if there are any disadvantages other than maybe there's someone you want to go to at the end of the ball game to make that winning basket. But we have a few people on our team who are more than happy to accept that challenge.
Now, one player shooting particularly well from the foul line is Michelle Connolly. She's made 18 of her last 19, 12 in a row. She's leading the league in free throw percentage, and yet if you just watched her shoot a free throw, she doesn't have the most orthodox style. Is there any reason for her shooting this year? I know it's improved drastically over the last couple of years.
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact, repetition. She's getting more free throws. Last year with the limited play, she would maybe get 2 or 3 free throws per game, and maybe it was 1 of 2 or 2 of 3. Against Northern Kentucky, she was able to shoot 10 free throws and make 9 of them for us. And she's been doing very, very well from the line, and I certainly don't want to do anything to jinx her. Yesterday we made the announcement to the team that she was first in the league in free throw percentage, and we no more than mentioned that, and she bricked a few during the free throw drill and laughed about it. But I'm very pleased with her free throw shooting, especially the key moments of the game.
Okay, well, I'd like to wish you guys good luck Saturday. Thank everyone for tuning in, and remind everyone to tune in to Coach K's Corner every Thursday.
Catch all the action of top-ranked men's volleyball this weekend at IPFW. Tickets available at all Ticketmaster locations or call 481-6643.
This is the increasingly competitive world we live in, and this is the country we want ahead of the competition. These are the people we'll be depending on to keep this country ahead of the competition. These are the colleges and universities we're relying on for the people we're depending on to keep this country ahead of the competition. So if you want America to stay #1 in the world, do something about it. Give to the college of your choice.
I always wanted to be like my father, order me a dry martini.
I saw that there was an image behind drinking, the people that drank, that they looked older and sophisticated.
I was 11 when I lost my virginity to a guy who was 17. I was drunk.
Drinking had taken me so far down I had to get out of my house.
Sometimes I'd sleep in the woods. If I didn't sleep in the woods, I slept on the corner. If I didn't sleep on the corner, I slept at someone's house who I didn't even know.
I had wound up in a lot of trouble with the law. I had wound up in jail.
When I was drinking, I was with a lot of guys, and a lot of guys used me.
I hurt my parents dearly, and I knew at the time I was doing it, but I didn't care, just as long as I got high.
I was so miserable. I hated myself. Every time I looked in the mirror, I wanted to cry.
Hey, yo, alcohol is a drug, man, and you can get hooked on it. And the younger you start, the more damage you can do. Word.
It's just no experience for no kids my age or anyone younger.
If you want to be somebody, have a family, have a future, just say no.
Say no and say yes to your life.
Hello and welcome to Coach K's Corner. I'm Dave Hilbert, IPFW Sports Information Director. Marlene, you guys had a tough week last week, couple of losses. You started out with a game at home to St. Francis. What was your game plan going into that game?
To win, number one. We just came back from a long road trip with Wesleyan and Southern Indiana, I'm just not sure that the girls were ready to play basketball on Tuesday night. Probably one of the less intense games that I've seen us play all year long. And I'm not one to try to find excuses. I just don't think that we were ready to play, and we didn't come out and take care of business from the start. Even though we did at one point have a 14-point lead, it was if, I guess, just assuming that we were going to win, we just kind of let St. Francis take over, and I give them all the credit in the world. They came out and they played hard, and there was an injury that delayed the game for about 10 minutes, and that was at the time when we had, tempo going in our favor. And after that, I believe they did catch up and tie the ball game, and then it was back and forth, and almost got it at the end, but time ran out on us.
Do you find it's tougher sometimes to get the team up for a non-conference game, especially on a night other than your normal Thursday-Saturday routine?
I believe so. A few of the players made comment that it felt odd playing on a Tuesday night out of conference. But it's an opportune time to play during the week. With our travel partner being Ashland, we only have one game for that week, and it's good to put in another game. And with the change of start of season and so forth in the NC2A rules, we have to get our extra games in sometime. We can't put only so many in during the Christmas holidays and so forth, so we have to put a few in during the conference play, and it's just something that we should have taken care of. It was a good opportunity for us, and we just weren't ready to play.
You guys jumped out to a big lead in the first half and early in the second half. What were some of the keys to getting out to that lead?
Well, part of that, I guess, would be taking care of the pressure. They applied full court pressure throughout the entire game, and that's something that we have been somewhat weak at handling throughout the year. We do get pressed a lot. Our girls used to be, or we're hoping that has improved, quite tentative against the press, and I think basically we decided to take care of business and get the ball moving a little bit more, a little less dribbling, a little more passing, looking for the open people against the press, and get the ball down court. And we did have a few moments where we were able to slice through the press and come up with a layup and convert a few times, and I believe that's what gave us our lead, but it didn't last for very long.
Now, as they started coming back, what happened to let them back in the game?
Well, they had some outstanding shooting. If I recall, the Wright girl was unstoppable. We were in her face, and she was turning around us and shooting over top of us, and just laying everything in. Everything she put up went in, and that really helped them a great deal. Plus, they hit the boards real hard, got the offensive boards, a few putbacks. They made a few three-point shots toward the end of the game that got them back in. So, and some turnovers on our part, too. We had some crucial turnovers at times when we needed to convert.
Now, you mentioned the injury in the first half. It was a scary moment for everyone that was there. The player was down for a while. They eventually had to take her off on a stretcher and bring in the EMTs. Do you know what happened to cause that, and then what her status was as they took her out?
All I know, I don't know exactly how it happened. I know there was a collision under the basket, and she fell to the ground and had mentioned that she had some tingling or numbness in her legs, and that caused everyone to be concerned, our trainer and so forth. So they thought it was best to have the ambulance come in and remove her in the backboard just to make sure. And I did call the next day to see how she was doing, and was told that she was released without injury and that she should be back in play.
Did it have any effect on the players? I mean, just seeing something like that, and I know it had an effect on a game. It caused a huge stoppage, a 4 or 5 minute stoppage while you guys were on a roll. But did the players seeing that? Does that ever kind of shake them up a little? Seeing something like that happen, especially these days when you've seen it in pro sports. A couple of times in football, the guys being carried off the field and paralyzed.
Right. I think that thought may have gone through their mind. We talked about that a little bit at the timeout that we had, and we just wished the best for her, and our prayers were with her at that time, because you certainly don't want to see a serious injury like that with any athlete. And I think it did have a little effect on us, but we got back out on the court and shot some free throws and tried to get our minds back in the game. And I think, as far as St. Francis goes, I think it gave them a little bit of an incentive. They all rallied around the cot as she went out the door, and were cheering and so forth. And I'm sure we're telling her that we'll give our best shot to win the ball game, and they did that. So I give them all the credit for that.
Now then, Saturday you went to Ashland, a team that was about the middle of the pack in the conference. Did you have a specific game plan going into that game?
Well, we were down in number for the Ashland game. Dawn Dressler could not play for us that day. She had to attend a funeral. So we were down in number, and basically we wanted to take care of the basketball. We assumed that they would press us somewhat. We did not have as many turnovers as Ashland did. It was 19-20. However, there were moments when we did turn the ball over against their press, and they converted on layups. We were hoping that Ashland would continue to have somewhat of the shooting slump that they've been having. They have not been shooting real well from the field, and they don't have, you know, a real strong three-point shooter. So our hope was to take care of their best shooter and zone the rest of the people and take away their inside game, which was their strength. And it would have been effective. However, young lady Forrester came out and made her first 3 shots from about 15 feet. And I think right after that, 2 post players made their first 2 shots. So they made the first 5 or 6 shots of the game, which is unlike them. So that hurt us right away. We did get down by as many as 18 points. And we were also told that Ashland is one that doesn't play as well second half, that if you really get after it, you can bring things back. And that was our goal second half. We went to man-to-man defense, put a lot of full court pressure on them. Started to pick up the tempo a little bit too offensively because we were running out of time. And we were able to bring it back within 5 points. And probably had an opportunity at the end to convert another layup and just couldn't get it to go down.
Now, one thing that you saw in this game was you guys went to the free throw line almost twice as much as Ashland. That's something you haven't seen much this year. Is any particular reason for that? Or?
Well, I would have to say that Ashland plays a very aggressive game. Another thing, as I mentioned, we only had 7 players with us that day, and they have about 14 players on their roster. So they were able to rotate a lot of people, and in doing so, you know, play very physically and very aggressive. And as a result, they do commit a lot of fouls. And we were able to go to the line quite a bit. It was our goal second half especially to get the ball inside as much as we could, because we were successful at doing that and drawing the fouls and putting ourselves to the line. You know, that may account for, too, that they shot the ball 63 times to our 49 times because they put us at the line so often. We shot 68% from the line. We're hoping that could have been better. It may have been the difference in the ball game. One thing that really hurt us, Dave, though, was for the first time ever, we were actually clobbered on the boards. In the past, many times we've out-rebounded our opponents, or we've come very close. Ashland out-rebounded us 44-30, and we just can't win ball games with 30 rebounds.
I think having Dawn out of the lineup obviously had something to do with that, but was there any other reason for that? Or?
Well, I would think that Dawn would have a lot to do with that, considering the fact that she's our leading rebounder. Mm-hmm. So we definitely needed those boards. Ashland just does a really good job of crashing the offensive boards and getting the putbacks. They did have some size. They were able to rotate a few people in at 6'1" and 6'2". I just did not think that we did a very good job at all in getting the box-out position on either end of the court.
Now, one thing your team's done all year is play some solid team defense. The team ranks second in the league in points allowed, I think 4th in opponent field goal percentage. What are some of the keys to playing a good team defense?
Well, I think teamwork and communication. That's something that we stress every day at practice, is that we do communicate, calling out the picks, calling out help when it's needed, trying to keep them out of the middle of the floor, forcing them to the sideline, protecting the baseline, and then, of course, once the shot is taken, getting a good box out and only allowing 1 shot if at all possible. It's something that we work on every day, and I'm very pleased to see that we do rank in those categories in the GLVC. I think our defense can get even better. It's something that I'm not totally satisfied with, and I think that we can do even better with it.
Do you think it's more likely for a team to adjust to an opponent's defense, or is it more likely for a team to adjust to another opponent's offense when preparing for a particular game that week?
Well, we try to find a happy medium with both. As far as adjusting to their offense, you know, we do cover that in a scouting report. We do a walkthrough the day before our game, and they're very familiar and acquainted with what kind of patterns they're going to be running, both offensive or zone defense and man-to-man defense. In preparing for their defense, and that's something that we have to stress just as much. If they're a high-pressure, hard denial, man-to-man defense, you know, we have to work on the backdoor cuts, we have to work on the V-cuts to get open, we have to work on setting good picks, and moving to the basketball to draw the fouls. So I think it's really a happy medium there, Dave, as far as preparing for both their offense and their defense.
Now, what about when you come up against an outstanding three-point shooting team? I think we've only really seen that one time this year with Indianapolis. I don't know, for example, when I was in Florida, our coach used to just let the team shoot and see what happened, and if they started missing, that usually, then the three-point shot, usually they would ignore it. How do you approach a team like that? Do you let them shoot, or do you get in their face right away, or?
Well, we've tried both. Against Indianapolis, we were hoping that we knew that the Graham girl was very good from three-point range, and the Hensley girl was only 2 of 4 for the season, so we allowed her to take a few the first half, and she made both. So that's an adjustment you have to make, and I guess it all depends on how well they're shooting that evening. Southern Indiana is well known for their three-point shot attempts. Over the season, they now have probably made, on the average, 6 to 8 three-point shots per game, with about 20 to 23 attempts per game. Just reading the other day with the Bellarmine stats, they're doing well from three-point range, and they were 7 of 15. That's a very high percentage, and that's a lot of points. That's 21 points, from three-point range, and that's something you certainly have to be aware of. What makes it difficult is when they have both an inside and outside game, and you have to come out and contest the three-point shot, but yet at the same time you're trying to take away their inside game, and you really have to extend your defense, and it makes it a lot more difficult than defending a team like Southern Indiana. Indianapolis, I would say, that evening had to be about the same. We were comfortable with Ashland and realizing that we didn't have to concern ourselves as much, with the three-point shot, and they were only 1 of 8 that evening. But what they did well was make the shorter jump shots, a step or 2 inside three-point range.
What are some adjustments you can make during the game, especially like you said in this game where you're getting out-rebounded by a pretty good margin? What types of things can you do to try to help that situation?
Well, you can stress it a great deal at timeout. You can make substitutions. And then you can talk about it some more at practice and maybe run a few sprints for not making it happen. But it certainly was not a night that we did a very good job of boxing out. And we need to work on that this week at practice.
Okay, now this week you've got a couple of tough games coming up. Bellarmine, a team that's always one of the best teams in the league. You've had some outstanding games with them. And then Kentucky State coming into town. What type of game do you expect to see out of Bellarmine? I know they've got some new faces this year.
Well, I think that they're much improved as far as their perimeter game goes. Last year they basically had 1 outside shooter, and now looking at the stats, there are 2 or 3 people who are doing very well from three-point range. And then they have their inside game back, with the exception of Shannon O'Bannon. So Kukovic is their leading scorer at this point, and they really have a very well-balanced team. And I know that they're going to come out and they're going to play, very hard in-your-face man-to-man defense. They have some good depth. They have a few transfers in and some freshmen who are contributing. So they are a very solid basketball team. And they've had a very difficult pre-conference schedule against a lot of Division II schools they put themselves up against, and I really think that it's starting to pay off for them now that they've entered the conference play.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break here, but before we do, I'd like to remind everyone that both games this weekend will start at 6:05, Thursday's game against Bellarmine and Saturday's game against Kentucky State.
Of top-ranked men's volleyball this weekend at IPFW. Tickets available at all Ticketmaster locations, or call 481-6643.
This is the increasingly competitive world we live in, and this is the country we want ahead of the competition. These are the people we'll be depending on to keep this country ahead of the competition. These are the colleges and universities we're relying on, for the people we're depending on to keep this country ahead of the competition. So if you want America to stay #1 in the world, do something about it. Give to the college of your choice.
Hey, welcome back to Coach K's Corner. Coach, getting back to the Bellarmine game, and you played them twice last year. You split with them. We won here, they won there. How do you think you match up with them this year in terms of maybe some of the key individual matchups?
Well, as I mentioned, they have a very strong inside game, and I'm hoping that our post people can take care of that. Michelle Conley's been doing a very good job of holding the post player below their average over the last few games, and I am pleased with that. However, we're really going to have to get after and defend the outside shooting that they have this year. I think, as I mentioned, they're much improved in the perimeter game and have a few more people who are able to shoot the three-point shot. They have at least 3 players who can do that for them with very high percentages. Last year they had basically just one outside shooter, one three-point shooter, Bronner, for them, but they have a few more this year, and that's going to make it difficult for us. They are scoring a lot of points. They're getting a lot of points on the board, not just from three-point range, but just creating things with their defense and converting some layups and just shooting well from the field.
Now you mentioned Kohowitz, their leading scorer. Now last year they had the one outstanding player who was the All-American who ended up getting hurt, came back toward the end of the year. Do they have more of a balanced attack this year now that she's out of the picture?
I would say that they do. When you have a player like that, you do have a tendency to focus on her. When she was injured last year in the final 6 minutes of the game, you know, they had to play without her, and I think that was more of a mental thing than anything. I think they could have been just as good a ball club. Our full court pressure did give them trouble. Maybe that would be successful for us this year as well. We have been able to make comebacks with teams. We've had several games where we've been down by 12 and 14 and 18 points and have been able to come back and bring it within 4 or 5 toward the end of the ball game. And the unfortunate thing is that we don't have the depth on the bench to do that in the entire game. And we can, you know, maybe the last 10 minutes throw our full court pressure on and really get after it and bring the margin back, you know, to a smaller amount. But we can't do that for 40 minutes. And we do throw it in once in a while, you know, first half perhaps with a little pressure. And that may be something that we can use against Bellarmine, you know, this Thursday.
Do you think Bellarmine might be really gunning for IPFW? Because I know last year when we got into the tournament and Bellarmine didn't get in, they had a 23-5 record, and I know they're a little upset that they didn't get in with that record, and we got in. Do you think there might be a little extra incentive there for them to really come in here and play well?
Well, I think every conference game that they approach, they're going to take the same attitude. They are out to prove to people that they are worthy of the NC2A tournament bid, and at this point I truly feel that they are. They've been doing very well, and I give them credit for that, and they are a strong ball club, and it's always good for our conference to get a few teams into the NC2A tournament. St. Joe's not doing as well as they did last year, but I'm hoping that we can get a few teams in the NC2A tournament this year, because it always, you know, reflects on our conference.
Now you mentioned Bellarmine's played a much more difficult non-conference schedule. Because I know last year that was probably the thing that kept them out of the tournament, even with the outstanding record, was the soft non-conference schedule. This year they did the complete opposite. And like you said, they played some solid Division II teams, a couple of Division I teams. How important is that, not only in terms of your standing in the region and NCAA rankings, but just in terms of preparing your season preparing your team for the conference?
I think it really is advantageous to play some difficult teams pre-season or pre-conference because it just brings you up at a level of play where you need to be for the conference. And if you go through pre-conference with a softer schedule, sometimes it's an element of surprise when you get to the conference. However, there are those teams, and sometimes as a coach you do want to plan it as such that if you have a young ball club and a lot of teaching needs to be done, playing maybe a softer schedule pre-conference could be helpful in just preparing your team for conference play, as far as learning your system, learning the plays and the offense and so forth.
Now, I think obviously as a coach you never want to lose a game, but do you think it might be, especially when you have a veteran team that's always enjoyed success, do you think it might, like I said, not that you want to lose a game, but it might be almost a good thing to lose early in the season and go through that?
Right, all coaches will say that there's such a thing as a good loss. We don't like to lose, but sometimes there are losses that get us going. I imagine perhaps a Duke men's team might be thinking that same thing after their loss to Virginia, that maybe that was a good loss for them, and they'll get things going for the rest of the conference and looking for the NC2A tournament. But I agree with that. I think that sometimes a loss can help you.
Okay, now this week, or Saturday night, after the Bellarmine game Thursday, you got Kentucky State coming in, a team that last couple of years has finished toward the bottom of the league. They're 2-9 this year. They haven't won in the league. I know you said during the break you'd rather play them Thursday instead of Saturday. Why is that? Well,
Bellarmine's going to be a very difficult game for us, and being that we have just 8 players, As far as fatigue goes, I would say that Bellarmine's the tougher team, and I don't think anyone would disagree with me on that. But I think Kentucky State's still going to give us a tough game, and perhaps it would be to our advantage if we play Kentucky State first and Bellarmine second.
What types of matchups are going to be important in the game with Kentucky State?
Well, I expect a very physical, aggressive defensive game from Kentucky State. As far as the matchups go, I think we're pretty evenly balanced inside, outside. They do have one young lady who is, I believe, second in the conference in scoring, and is doing a very good job for them, and she can score from just about any place. I think it's going to be a battle on the boards, and we're definitely going to have to take care of the pressure. They're going to have a little more quickness than we do, and we'll just have to make sure that we control the tempo that evening.
You think their team that's a little bit more, I guess, under control this year? I know last year I think at Christmas time, their coach left, a couple of players quit, their assistant had to take over, and they're kind of in some disarray there. Are they a little more stable this year?
Yes, stable is a good word to use. I would definitely agree that they have a lot more stability this year with what they have going with their program.
And do you have to worry at all about your team maybe being a little kind of looking past this team, especially last year you destroyed them both games, won by 50 and 60 points. Is that anything to worry about a little?
I think at this point, with the 2-3 record in the conference, that we're not looking beyond anyone, that we're going to approach every game with the same attitude. We want to win the game and improve our conference record, and it really doesn't matter who it is. We're going to put forth as much effort.
Is it going to be nice coming home? And you did have the home game Tuesday, which was an off night, but your last 3 conference games you played on the road, and 2 of your longer trips of the year is going to help the team being at home all week?
I believe so. It's always good to play at home, and now that they've resumed their classes, getting back on schedule and playing 2 home games in a row here will certainly be helpful, because traveling does have a little bit of wear and tear, and it'll be nice to be home again.
Okay, now even though at this point you've got the 5-9 record, what do you see as some of the successes that you've accomplished so far this season?
Well, a few things that we talk about. We are pleased that we are holding teams down as far as scoring and field goal percentage. We have been pleased with our rebounding so far as a balanced rebounding effort up until this last game with Ashland. And other things that we talk about too are just becoming an experienced ball club. Because we were quite youthful as far as playing time goes. We talked about the fact that we've had a few games now where we've been down by as many as 14 points, 18 points with Ashland, and we've managed to make a comeback. So my team certainly is not a group of quitters. They're going to hang in there, and even though we don't have the depth maybe some other teams do, it's almost twice as difficult for them to get out there and play hard for 40 minutes, to make the comeback, and then to play the game at the end with only a few seconds remaining, maybe less than a minute, and strategically have to try to work everything as best you can with timeouts, with substitutions, and trying to get the clock stopped, and looking for the 3-point shot plays. It's preparing us, hopefully down the stretch, for games where perhaps the game will be a little closer throughout, and in the final moments we have to make good decisions and execute on the last second plays, that we'll have that experience, and I think that's going to help us down the stretch.
Do you think that record is deceiving at all? Because I know going into the Ashland game, you looked in the stat sheet, you had 914 total points, your opponents had 914 total points. So, you've got the 5-9 record, there's only 5 points, total points for the season separating you and your opponents. So do you think that record is maybe a little deceiving?
Oh, perhaps it could be. Starting out, as a young club, if we could go back and play some of those early games over again, perhaps the outcome would be different, because we are a much improved ball club. However, we have had 4 and 5 games where we have lost by 4 or fewer points, and I think that may have a lot to do with it. Plus, early on, our first 2 wins, we beat Taylor convincingly by 13, and then Hillsdale by even more so, around, I think it was about 34 points that we defeated them. So that kind of balances out the scoring, so it might be a little bit deceptive in looking at that.
Now, what are some of your goals for the rest of the year, both team goals, individual goals? Anything that you're looking for during the second half of the season?
Well, right now our goal is to take one game at a time, and we certainly want to, as everyone does, come up with the best conference record that we possibly can. We have put pre-conference behind us and basically are focusing on our conference play at this point. And it's very early in the race. We all know, as like last year, a lot of things can happen in the second round in playing everyone. And we're hoping that the people we've lost to the first round when we get them in our place, like Ashland, we're hoping that, and Southern Indiana and Wesleyan, that those can be victories for us too.
Now that you're just about halfway through your season, played 14 out of your 27 games, how would you rate both the development of your young players to this point and then the progress of your veteran players?
Well, I have to say that our freshmen have really jumped in there and have caught on to things fairly quickly. Their attitudes are very good. Each game out, we put forth as best effort as we can. Michelle Conley, Kim Recker have really improved, inside, especially defensively for us. Amy Hogan has done some good things for us as of late from the field. She is probably our better outside shooter, and she has come up with some good games. Against Ashland, she was 4 of 8, 50% from the field, and has made a few three-point shots toward the end of the ball game when we needed them. I would have to say she is a pressure shooter, and I think she's improved in that department. Amy Perkins has improved a great deal in handling the pressure, being our point guard, and having to do that for almost 40 minutes per game. Has really hung in there and has kept her turnovers down and is doing quite well. Has improved in the assist department. I believe she ranks 5th right now in the conference in assist. So we have improved in those areas, and I think we've improved too in just the execution of everything that we do, especially our offense, and just making things better, refining things, setting better picks, looking for opportunities, reading the defense. If they play a certain way here, how can we take advantage of that and counteract that, and just reading the defense and making things happen for us.
Okay, well, I would like to thank you for coming on. Wish you luck in your 2 games this week. Remind everybody again, IPFW women's team will be in action Thursday against Bellarmine, Saturday night against Kentucky State, both games starting at 6:05.
Catch all the action of top-ranked men's volleyball this weekend at IPFW. Tickets available at all Ticketmaster locations or call 481-6643.
This is the increasingly competitive world we live in, and this is the country we want ahead of the competition. These are the people we'll be depending on to keep this country ahead of the competition. These are the colleges and universities we're relying on for the people we're depending on to keep this country ahead of the competition. So if you want America to stay #1 in the world, do something about it. Give to the college of your choice.
Hello and welcome to Coach K's Corner. I'm Dave Hilbert, IPFW Sports Information Director. Madeline, you guys had a couple of vastly different games last week. Started out the week with a close loss to Bellarmine, team that is leading the league right now. I think they're 7-1 in the league, 3-point loss. What was your game plan going into that game?
Well, we knew it was going to be a difficult game for us, being that they are first place in the conference. Our game plan was to go in and play some good, solid man-to-man defense. We realized, though, that they had the good perimeter shooting from 2 or 3 of their people. especially their leading scorer, Bronner, who's scoring quite well from three-point range. And then we knew we had to deal with Kohowitz inside, their senior post player, who was second in scoring for the league, or for the team. And we did a fairly good job. Michelle Conley, first half, was able to keep her to two baskets inside the paint. And unfortunately, she got in a little foul trouble and had to spend some time on the bench. And that kind of affected us second half. But we basically wanted to go in and play a half-court game with them. They have been averaging quite high, I think about 77 points per game, which ranks pretty high in the conference. We wanted to hold them down, and we've been notorious for that and holding teams down into the 60s, and we were able to accomplish that. Another thing we wanted to do was certainly keep them off the boards, give them one shot and one shot only, and I felt that we did a pretty good job rebounding. We had a few times where we broke down, but overall we did a good job. Controlling the tempo on the offense, setting good picks and just executing, handling their pressure, which I really feel we did a good job as well. It was overall a very good ball game. Very pleased with the way that we played. I certainly would have been more pleased had we won the basketball game, but I think too with the depth that they had to work against us, was probably to their advantage, but I give our girls all the credit in the world for hanging in there. It was a very enduring basketball game, and we took it to the very end, and unfortunately just didn't end up with the victory.
Now you mentioned player Kohowitz for Bellarmine, one of the top post players in the league. Have you gone up against any other players that type of quality as far as post players this year?
I would say that we've been up, against a few who may be as skilled. The thing that Kohowitz has going for herself is that she's a senior and has a lot of experience, and at different times is able to, outsmart a defensive player. She does a real good job of setting you up on the pin and then on the reverse, getting the seal inside and getting the basketball. And being left-handed makes it a little bit more difficult too, to get accustomed to guarding a left-hander.
Now the fact that you were able to if not stop, at least slow her down quite a bit in the first half, is that something you think you'll be able to carry over to the games you've got coming down the road?
I certainly hope so. I am pleased with our post defense. I think it has improved. Kim Recker is coming along as well. Jenny Newhart, being a freshman, has a few things to learn here and there, but she certainly is extremely coachable and is making the adjustments as we go along here. But I hope it's something that we can continue to do well. I felt that we've done well in some other games. Northern Kentucky was another situation where we basically took away their inside game. And we certainly need to do that. When we're up against teams that have good three-point shooters as well, it makes it a little bit more difficult. Southern Indiana would be a good example of that. Their leading scorer is a post player, and then they have 2 or 3 people shooting 48% from three-point range. So you have to extend your defense a little bit, and that opens up the inside a little and puts a lot more pressure on our post-defensive players.
Now you mentioned the the three-point shot. Bellarmine came into the game as that was a main weapon in their offense. They're one of the league-leading teams in field goals made and field goals attempted and percentage. But in that game, it really wasn't much of a factor. Why was that?
Well, that was certainly a goal of ours going into the game, was to shut down their three-point shooters. We played them very tightly. At times, maybe it hurt us as far as them being able to get the ball inside. But in our game last year with them as well at their place, we held their leading scorer down to just 1 3-point shot. And that was a goal of ours. I was pleased with the outcome on three-point shooting. I think that had a lot to do with the fact that the score was so low, and if we could have just perhaps taken a few away from the inside, maybe we would have come up with the victory.
What were some of the key plays toward the end of the game that resulted in the loss?
Well, I felt for a moment, throughout the game, I felt we controlled the tempo quite well, but second half, maybe midway through, right below the 10-minute mark, if fatigue was a factor, I saw just a sluggish moment there where they did take a few defensive boards and get their fast break going. They sent a girl long for the layup after a made free throw, caught us off guard. Started to drive a little bit more and drawing some fouls and just getting some more putbacks. So if fatigue was a factor, I saw it happen. However, we rallied together again, and I believe we were down by as many as 7 points with just a few minutes remaining, and brought it back to just 3 at the very end.
Does even though you lost the game, but it was just a 3-point loss to like I said, the best, at least in terms of record, the best team in the league. Does that help your team gain some confidence, even though they did lose?
I would hope so. As we discussed after the game, if we could put forth that same effort and control with the remaining of our games, certainly we could, fare quite well in the conference. There are some tough teams up there: Indianapolis, Northern Kentucky, St. Joe, all of which will have the opportunity to play again in St. Joe and Louis for the first time this weekend. But if we can get the same kind of execution and the same kind of effort each time out, who's to say how we may finish?
Now, in a couple of weeks, you have to go back down to Bellarmine, play them at their place, which is always a tough place to win. Did you learn some things from this game that you think you might help you in that ball game?
Well, I would guess we probably would take about the same approach in playing them. Hopefully just eliminate some of our own mistakes. We had 29 turnovers in the game, kind of quiet turnovers. A lot of them unforced. Different times that turnovers were created because we tried to force the ball inside on the strong side, first entry pass, and that was something that we talked about, to work the offense a little bit, get the ball reversed at least one time. I think we even had a shot clock violation at one time, and we just need to decrease the turnovers that we had against them and play basically the same style of basketball. It's difficult to play in their gymnasium. Unfortunately, we don't get to the free throw line as often as we did here. We got to the free throw line quite often this past weekend. So it's hard to say. I'm sure they'll be keyed up to play us at their place as always, but it wasn't just a few years ago that we did defeat Bellarmine, at their school for the first time. So anything could happen.
Then Saturday night, a little bit different story. You had Kentucky State into town, team near the bottom of the league. You ended up with a 99-58 win. What was your approach going into that game?
Well, once again, we just wanted to take care of business. And even though they're one of the weaker teams in the conference, we certainly did not want to overlook them. We saw it as another opportunity to go out there and to capture a GLVC win. And that was certainly our goal. And something I stressed before the game, we needed everyone to put forth as much effort as they did on Thursday night, and to go out there and attack them from the start and not allow them to get into the basketball game and drag it out. We wanted to jump on them early and get a solid lead and go from there.
Okay, now we're going to take a look at some clips here in a minute. What were some of the keys to that win?
Well, I'd have to say that we were able to pick the tempo up a little bit, and that was largely due to a number of steals that we did get, and created a lot of 3-on-2, 2-on-1 situations for ourselves. Amy Perkins had 10 assists that night and did a real good job with that. Lindy Jones had an incredible shooting night for us, and setting a school record of 16 made field goals in a game and ended up with 34 points. She was really able to penetrate quite well. I thought so defensively. Our goal was to just create a lot of chaos for them. As you can see here, we did create quite a few turnovers. Bellarmine bringing the basketball down. We did, get quite a few steals ourselves. We were able to get some deflections out of bounds and plug up the inside, probably first half better than the second half, as you just saw in that clip.
Now you mentioned Lindy Jones finished with 34 points as a career high. She hit the school record with the 16 field goals. Is there any special reason for that performance? I mean, she looked like right when the game started, the first couple times she got the ball, she just took it right in and scored.
Well, it's probably, as you mentioned earlier, she had her Wheaties before the game. But I was very pleased with Lindy's performance, and I think it was just a situation where, she does drive to the hole so well, and they just gave her that opportunity. And she was able to get the short shots inside. She drew a few fouls and took a few jumpers when they went zone on us and pulled the defense out a little bit, and she just had a good game.
Is it tough to have a week off after a game like that?
Tough to have a week off? Well...
or not a week off, but a week without a game, I should say.
It's always good to have a little rest. In fact, I gave the girls a day off yesterday because we are down to 8 players. I do have to take into consideration that there is some wear and tear, and wanted to give the girls adequate rest, especially since we'll be hitting the road this coming Thursday and Saturday.
Okay, here's another clip.
Yeah, here we have Dawn Dressler making the drive, and that's something I think that helped us out a lot against Bellarmine the first half. As you can see, we got ourselves in bonus quite early and were able to go to the line, and that's something we talked about at the timeout because we were in bonus, that we needed to get the line to keep the score as it was, and I think that helped us out a great deal.
How important is it to get a win like this, just a huge win, a game where you can get everybody in, everybody has pretty much of a good game, especially after having a tough loss just a couple days earlier?
Well, I certainly think it's a boost for everyone. As we talked about before the game, we were all very hungry for a victory, and it's always pleasing as a coach, too, to be able to get everyone in and everyone has the opportunity to score. A lot of things start to fall in place. You get your fast break going a little bit more. The crowd gets excited. We have a few fancy passes here or there, and it just boosts everyone's confidence a little bit and makes them feel good about things, and I think really helps us for our next game.
Now, you mentioned before the game Amy Perkins had 10 assists, but also no turnovers. And it's one thing she's cut down a lot on lately, her turnovers. Here's another, this is a clip from the Bellarmine game.
Yeah, here we are with the steal, or what, no, it's breaking the press there. Amy Perkins did a real good job breaking the press, and you see a dish off to Kim Recker. You know, this is against Bellarmine, and we did expect a great deal of full court pressure from them. And 2 or 3 different times in the first half, we were able to get through the press, and Amy had a lot to do with that, and bring the ball on down for the layup conversion, which certainly helped us. And of course, Bellarmine then took some of the pressure off, and I certainly think that helped us out in the game.
What are some of the reasons for her improved play? Is it just a matter of this being her first year as a starter? Is it just a matter of getting out there and feeling more comfortable as the season goes along?
I think that has a lot to do with it. Amy has certainly gained a lot more experience. She's a lot more confident of herself. She knows that I'm not going to yank her if she makes a mistake or two. She has to play a lot of minutes for us, and I think she has really risen to the occasion to fill that role for us. I know she does get fatigued, and you know that may have had something to do with our Bellarmine game. I felt there was a moment when I had to take her out of the game later in the second half. Had to do over. I may not have made that choice because perhaps she could have made it throughout the game. Who's to say? Hindsight's 20/20. But she's done a real good job for us, and we do practice an awful lot with the backcourt pressure, the full court presses. You know, every day we practice against that. And I think she's become a little more accustomed to that pressure.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll take a look ahead to next week's games.
Catch all the action of top-ranked men's volleyball this weekend at IPFW. Tickets available at all Ticketmaster locations or call 481-6643.
This is the increasingly competitive world we live in, and this is the country we want ahead of the competition. These are the people we'll be depending on to keep this country ahead of the competition. These are the colleges and universities we're relying on for the people we're depending on to keep this country ahead of the competition. So if you want America to stay #1 in the world, do something about it. Give to the college of your choice.
Welcome back to Coach K's Corner. We're going to, before we look ahead to next week's games, we're going to take a look at just a couple more highlights from the Kentucky State games. Another statistic that kind of jumped off the page in that game was the rebounding. You guys rebounded them by almost a 2-to-1 margin. That seems to be something you guys have been improving on lately.
Well, it's something we're working on a great deal at practice because I've been disappointed in the number of offensive rebounds that we've been getting. It seemed at times we're just getting one shot only. And so I've really encouraged our post players and challenged them to try to get near the double digits in their rebounding. Dawn Dressler, a guard forward for us, is our leading rebounder with over 7 rebounds a game. So I'm encouraging our post players, almost demanding our, our post players get more rebounds, especially in the offensive end.
Now, you mentioned before Amy Perkins in the last game with the 10 assists, no turnovers. She had 9 points, but all from the line. I know she's been making quite a few drives to the hole. Is that something she's been concentrating on lately?
Yes, she has, and in this clip you'll see Amy bringing the ball up the court, and we've talked to her about, you know, making the drive to the basket when she sees the opportunity, and she's actually done that. She started out at the beginning of the season averaging about 4 points a game. Here she takes it to the hole, draws the foul, and gets to go to the line. And that night, as you mentioned, she was 9-11 from the line. I didn't have any field goals, but certainly drove to the basket, drew the fouls, got us an early bonus, which really helped us out the first half, and she's done a good job with that. She's increased her average from about 4 points a game now to 6.9, and I'm very, very pleased with that.
Now then, Lindy Jones, we're going to get a look at in a second. Do you think it was tough for her that the first game she ever played, she scores 27 points to lead the team? And with a lot of the build-up she got from her outstanding high school career here, do you think all of a sudden everybody expected her to kind of do that every night?
I don't think that was the case. I think Lindy's handled things quite well, and she's been consistent in getting in double figures for us, averaging 10 to 12 points a game, and then different nights having a better night. And that's been consistent with just about everyone in the starting lineup. Michelle Conley's had her opportunities where she scored in the 20s. Dawn Dressler has. Kim Recker has. I would say Amy Perkins probably is the only one that hasn't reached 20. However, she did have a game of 16 points. So they've all taken turns where they've had a better night, and I don't think that's affected Lindy by any means. And I was just pleased for her to be able to have such a good game last Saturday night against Kentucky State.
You think it makes it easy or more difficult for a team to prepare to face you, having 5 players that could score between 15 and 20 points on any given day?
I hope that that does make it more difficult for them. Unlike last year, perhaps, Lisa Miller was certainly the focus for many teams, and it's good for us to have 4 players in double figures, all averaging between 10 and 12 points a game, and for that reason they can't focus on just one player, and they have to honor everyone, respect everyone as a scorer, and that's something that we've talked about as a team before the season started, that we wanted to have balanced scoring and just really work together. We knew that we'd have to.
You think Lindy could be down the road maybe the player who would score 20 points a game, 15, 20 points a game? It would be that top player?
I would hope that for her as she gains experience here. Lindy did a real good job against Kentucky State, as you see here, just penetrating real well. She was able to draw the foul a few times, but she's pretty quick, has a good quick first step, and as you see here, taking it into the paint, and has that little double pump shot that fell for her quite frequently that night. As you see now, she's going to get a steal here, so she was contributing to both ends of the court. She is 8th in the conference in steals, and that pleases me. She has a steal here and gets it under control and takes it on in for the layup. Or take it back, she didn't make the layup. She got the steal. That's the point I wanted to make. Scores and then goes in the air and gets the steal for us, and I like to see that kind of effort.
You've had a couple players picking up quite a few steals lately. Lindy's moved up into the league leaders. Michelle Conley, I think, had 11 steals her last 3 games. That's something you hope to see continue?
I certainly hope so, because it's something that I feel we fall short with our opponents as far as steals go. And that's probably one category up until recently that we haven't appeared in the top 10 in the conference. And I challenge all of our players to see if they can't be that person to surface, and Lindy has done that for us now that she is among the top 10 in the conference in steals. And Michelle Conley certainly has contributed the last few games.
Okay, now I'd like to take a look ahead at the games you got coming up this week. You go to Lewis on Thursday to play just outside of Chicago, and then over to Rensselaer to play at St. Joe on Saturday. Now Lewis has a new coach this year. The previous coach had been there for a few years, didn't have a lot of success. This year Lewis 5-8 overall, they're 2-5 in the league. What kind of things are you going to be looking for on Thursday?
I think it will be a fairly evenly matched ball game. It's really difficult as a coach to take a look at the scores, among other conference schools, and try to, make a judgment there as far as strength of team. Lewis has some good strength. They have Bonnie Richrath, who's doing quite well, one of the leading scorers in the conference, and she's both an inside and outside attack, and she's someone we certainly are going to have to keep under control. They do have a new coach, and they are a much improved ball club. And they've had some very close ball games. Some of the better teams in the conference, they have taken them right to the very end. Even though probably much like us, very close ball games toward the end, but just can't get over the hump. And I think will be a very competitive ball game for us on Thursday night.
Now they're, like I said before, 2-5 in the league. IPFW's 3-4, along with Ashland, who's 3-4, and you've got Northern Kentucky a game ahead of that, 4-3. Does that give you just a little bit more incentive going into this game, trying to maybe crack that upper half of the division?
It certainly does, and we talked about that at our team meeting yesterday. Because it's so early, in the conference play, we are just finishing the first round, and anything certainly could happen. Our goal is to take care of business with the teams that we feel we can compete with quite well, and then hopefully upset a few teams. Our goal is, of course, to beat Ashland when they come back to our place. And because we have beaten Northern Kentucky, we hope that puts us a game above them if we take care of business with the other schools. And then hopefully, against St. Joe coming up this weekend, and perhaps our second time around with Indianapolis, Northern Kentucky, and Bellarmine, if we could capture a victory there, we hope to move up and try to finish in the upper 5 of the conference.
Now Lewis, last year, played them twice and won fairly easily both times. Obviously, a much different team this year. But how does Lewis, their team this year, especially with the new coach, how do they compare to what they've had the last 2 years?
Well, as I mentioned, I think they're a much improved ball club. They have just about everyone back from last year. And probably the difference in their team compared to ours is they don't have as much balanced scoring. However, they do play a lot of people, and that kind of spreads the points out a little bit. And that will be something to their advantage as far as depth on the bench. As far as the inside game goes, we may have an inch or two on them inside, but you never know what that's going to mean. I thought that we kind of outsized Bellarmine as far as our starting lineup was concerned, but it all depends on what kind of defense they end up playing us and what they're able to get out of our defense offensively. And it's just a matter of waiting to see on Thursday night how we match up.
And then Saturday night you go to St. Joe, and obviously last time you were at St. Joe was probably the highlight of last year, at least one of them, winning at the last second, the game that got you into the tournament. Now St. Joe, I think they'd only lost 5 games in the last 3 years, and only 1 at home, or 2 at home during that time, 1 to IPFW last year. This year they started off kind of slow. Now they're 10-4 overall, 3rd place in the league at 5-2. What's different about St. Joe? I know they got a lot of players back, but what's accounting for, if you can call it a drop off? What's accounting for that?
Well, one thing that might be a factor. Paula Klein, graduated, their point guard, senior point guard from last year, and she was, I believe, leading the conference in assists at that time with about 10 assists per game, and that's an awful lot. And when you have a floor leader like that, graduate out of your program, I think there are some adjustments that need to be made, and they do have a lot of newcomers, in their program, a few transfers and a few freshmen. So perhaps just a matter of getting things to gel for them, but they've had some very solid games. And as I mentioned earlier, it's difficult to look at scores. Just the other night, St. Joe at Kentucky Wesleyan just slipped by 2 points, and I don't know that many people were expecting that. So once again, on any given night, anything could happen, and we certainly have high hopes for Saturday night against St. Joe and Rensselaer.
How do you guys match up with St. Joe? I know they've had a couple of players who've been star players there for a couple of years. Who are some of their key players, and how do you guys match up with them?
Well, of course, Tia Glass, is one of their key players, and she's a senior for them this year, so brings a lot of experience to the ball club. You may compare her with, or the whole team perhaps, with Bellarmine. A very strong inside-outside game. I don't know that St. Joe has the number of three-point shooters that Bellarmine does, but they certainly have the three-point shooters. And Tia Glass leading the conference in scoring is just very difficult to defend. As I mentioned, Michelle Conley got herself in early foul trouble trying to defend Bellarmine post player Kahowitz, and she's going to have her job cut out for her on Saturday, but she's always risen to the occasion and accepted the challenge. So Tia will be a key player that we'll need to take the inside game away from. And as far as their point and who runs the show, that's still to be decided on how we may handle that. But I look for a very balanced attack from St. Joe. And of course defensively, they're always very aggressive, and playing at home certainly keys them up. And maybe we can quiet the fans a little bit and come up with another victory like we did last year.
There might be a little revenge factor on St. Joe's side. You guys coming down there last year and handed them what I think was their only home loss of the year.
It was their only home loss. In fact, I believe it was our ticket into the NC2A tournament, and our girls really wanted that game. I don't know if there'll be any kind of revenge there from last year or not. I'm sure they wanted to defend their home court, win series, and may have a few bitter feelings from last year as far as us beating them at home in their last game. But it all depends on what happens on the court as far as the outcome of the game.
Now, after this weekend, you will have played everyone in the league one time, but having played everybody except Lewis and St. Joe, who do you see as the top teams in the league, and who do you think at this point might be, or is there a favorite? You've got Bellarmine 7-1, Indianapolis kind of a surprise at 6-1, and St. Joe and 5-2, and in Southern Indiana, I think another surprise right behind them at 5-2.
Well, my pick a while back was Indianapolis. I felt that they were somewhat of a sleeper team, and they didn't get one of the top or two spots in the preseason polls, and I knew that they were going to surface. They're a very balanced ball club, an experienced ball club, good inside-outside attack. I knew Bellarmine had a lot of people back, and they're going to be strong inside and outside. Everyone expected St. Joe to overpower the conference like they did last year, and that hasn't happened, but they're certainly at the top of the conference. Northern Kentucky, had a lot of people to replace, and Nancy does a very good job down there, and with the transfers and the freshmen that she has in, they're still among the top 5 in the conference. They're still doing a good job. Not as high as I'm sure they'd like to be, and suffering a few losses here and there. They're still doing a real good job with that. Southern Indiana, I give Chancellor Dugan all the credit in the world, bringing in the transfers that she did. She really has improved their ball club, and they're a very physical ball club. They have a good inside-outside attack. They're going to press you for 40 minutes, and I think that has a lot to do with the success that they've had this year and just the approach that she has taken. And as a result, they rank among the best in the conference.
Okay, well, thank you for coming by this week. Remind everyone, the team will be out of town this week, but the Mastodons will return home the following week to face Southern Indiana and Kentucky Wesleyan on Thursday and Saturday, February 4th and 6th.
Catch all the action of top-ranked men's volleyball this weekend at IPFW. Tickets available at all Ticketmaster locations or call 481-6643.
Hello and welcome to Coach K's Corner. I'm Dave Skelton from the development staff at IPFW, along this morning with Coach Eileen Kleinfelder, women's basketball coach at IPFW, and our guest player this morning, Jenny Newhard, freshman player from Woodland High School. We're going to be talking just a little bit with Jenny first, because Jenny is going to have to go to class pretty shortly, and those things are important now and then, right, Jenny?
That's right.
Jenny, you might tell us a little bit about how you felt about playing some college ball for the first year after having an outstanding high school career, but the level of competition is a little bit different.
Oh yeah, it's a lot more physical inside, and the playing, you got to get used to the court too, because it's a lot longer, so it took me a while to get used to that, running a lot farther, and playing a lot longer too. I had to get used to that for a while.
For those who don't realize it, the court is 10 feet longer, and 10 feet doesn't sound like very much until you're running up and down it about 50 times a night.
Yeah.
And you're right, the playing time, 20-minute halves compared to 8-minute quarters, and you don't get as many breaks unless the coach calls the timeout. Yeah. So longer time and longer court. What's been one of the most pleasing things as far as your game for you this year to have come along in comparison to your career previous to this time?
Well, I think I'm a little more stronger on the inside than I was last year. I post up harder and I call for the ball more. I used to just stand in there and wait for him to give it to me.
And if it came, you did something with it.
Yeah.
Coach Eileen, has it provided you with some additional flexibility to have another tall person to put in the lineup this year, and particularly Jenny, and to use her talents?
Most definitely. I'm real pleased with Jenny because we don't have a lot of depth in the team this year. Jenny's had to come in and play a lot of minutes. She's the first one off the bench in the post position. Shares time with Kim Recker and Michelle Conley. And I've been real pleased with her scoring efforts. You know, she's had some very, very good games. I also want to commend her, too, for her ability to block shots, and that was a surprise for me to have her ranked, I believe it's third in the conference in block shots as a freshman, and coming off the bench and doing that, and she's averaging a little over 1 a game.
Well, it had to be pretty pleasing probably for both of you, too, particularly in last Saturday night's performance over at St. Joe. Because, Jenny, I think you had a career high for here at IPFW, at least, with 24 points.
Yeah.
And against a very talented team, particularly very talented inside.
Mm-hmm.
And the game was an exciting game. I think St. Joe thought they might not have quite as tough a battle as they had, but it was a tough one.
Yeah, I was real pleased with the girls. They played 14 players and kept putting fresh people in, and I really felt, and I told the girls that at halftime and even after the game, I felt that their game plan was to come in and just run us in the ground. They sent their post players up and down court in a full sprint, and it was all our girls could do to keep up with them, and we didn't have the fresh people to put in continually. But Jenny did rise to the occasion and did very well against a very good basketball team.
Jenny, do you have any particular memories of the Southern Indiana team, which we played once before, and now that we're halfway through the conference season, we'll be playing everybody a second time. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the Southern Indiana team and anything particular you'd like to do with them this time?
Yeah, they're very physical, and they had very good defense. It was hard for our guards to get it into the post. They're very tight defense, and we need to get the ball down the court better. I think we will than last time. They had good full court pressure.
Now that we've played everybody in the conference one time, were there some players on some opposing teams that you had seen and played against in high school?
Yeah, well, Lori Hissong, I played with her.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few others, like in summer ball, I've played with several, like Kate Clemmer from Bellarmine.
Okay.
And Tia Glass from St. Joe.
And so there are several pretty outstanding players, too, in the GLVC from this area.
Yes, there is.
And not just on our team, some of the other teams, too.
Mm-hmm.
What's been your biggest surprise in playing the college game, besides the length of the court and the time that you have to play?
Probably the physicalness of the game. It's a lot more physical than high school. And plus, I think you can get away with a little more than you could in high school on defensive stuff.
Okay, and when you can get away with a little more, it tends to get a little more physical.
Yeah, it does.
It really does. We have, you're one of 3 freshmen on this year's team. Mm-hmm. The other 2 are in class today and couldn't be here, but Lindy Jones from Belmont, and you probably played against Lindy a good bit in high school.
Mm-hmm.
How do things change now that you're teammates? Do you talk about any of the old games from beforehand?
Well, I don't bring it up too often because they beat us every time. So
she might once in a while.
Yeah, every time.
The freshman class, again, has been playing a big role for this year's team, Coach, and it's been a matter of needing to replace some people that graduated last year, but with only 1 senior this year, and the freshmen and the juniors that we have, things looking encouraging for the Dons, aren't they?
Most definitely, Dave. After our St. Joe game, we felt we played a very good basketball game, and each time out, we give people a run for their money. We don't have the depth that they do, and maybe fatigue is a factor, but it's encouraging to see our team progress each game out. We get better and better. We make better decisions. We've had some very close ball games, and in the final moments of the game, we've gained that experience now, and even the freshmen, they're going to have that experience, and that can do nothing but help you in the future. It's going to carry over for the remaining games, and then next year, as you mentioned, graduating just 1 senior, and with hopes that Pam Edwards will return as a medical redshirt, next year should be an even better year for us.
Yeah, Pam has been out for the year, although she's been an ardent follower and probably doing some other things for the team as the season has progressed. But in fact, perhaps Pam has given a little advice to some of you newcomers, has she, as the season has moved along?
She's helped a lot.
Well, she would know, because she's been through those wars several times now, and hopefully she'll be able to join you again next year and to finish her 4th year. We have, as we said, completed the first half of the Great Lakes Valley Conference. Indianapolis and Bellarmine, 2 teams at the top. Any particular impressions of either one of you of those two teams?
I feel we'll be able to compete with them next time.
We had very good games with both of them,
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, the first time around. As you say, we've had good games with everybody in the conference. It's just that some bounce hasn't turned at the right time, at the right place, particularly like St. Joe last week. What, a minute and a half to go, and we're down, I think, 3?
I think we tried to cut it to 4, and we're
To 4?
not sure we
And
were there with the fouls at the end.
then some free throws stretched it back out at the end. But those two teams particularly, of course, we played them both here at home, and they're tough, they're good. Other conference teams have been playing kind of irregularly, other than those two. I shouldn't say irregularly, a little inconsistently maybe. Northern Kentucky, they're sitting at about 500, and that's a little bit of a surprise, isn't it, for this year?
Yes, they have a lot of new people in, a few transfers and some freshmen, and they lost 3 seniors last year, so they do have some leadership roles to fill. They have a good guard, McClellan, who's coming in and doing a good job for them, and I think she's 2nd or 3rd in scoring in the conference. But all the teams, as you mentioned, Bellarmine and Annapolis, they're on top. Fine ball clubs, and then you have Northern Kentucky, St. Joe. Lewis is even sneaking in there. They upset Ashland just this past weekend at Ashland by 2 points. Southern Indiana is a much improved ball club, and they've beaten some teams but have taken their lumps as well. And that's something that we're focusing on. If we can take care of business tonight and this Saturday, and certainly after that, we feel that we can move up a couple notches in the conference, and that's our goal, because Northern Kentucky is just a game or two ahead of us, and they've had their ups and downs as well.
Yeah, if we could just turn around 2 or 3 ball games in the first round, why, we'd be back in the hunt there too, and that could very well happen in the second go-around for the conference. There's another item I have to bring up, because anyone who has been to any of our games this year has probably witnessed that aroma that's in that gymnasium at every home game that just kind of draws you over toward the northeast corner of the gymnasium, and you reach in your pocket, pull out 50 cents, and buy a cookie. Your team has had a project this year, and you might tell us a little bit about that project.
Well, maybe I ought to. I'm not sure Jenny knows why we're selling cookies. We're going to make a trip next year to Southwest Texas State. And it's a 3-game tournament, and a very fine tournament that they are very well known for.
Early in the season?
Early in the season. It'll be December 1st through the 5th. And as I mentioned, we'll play 3 games, and most of the teams will be top 20 caliber, and it'll be a very good game for us. And we're just trying to raise a few extra funds to pay for those plane tickets.
Well, I can say this, those, as I've had several throughout the course of the year, but those cookies are just delicious. As a matter of fact, I even had the opportunity one night to help bake some of those and sell at the table, and even that worked out all right. So I guess if I can do it, most anybody could do it.
We should have checked and made sure you didn't eat the profits that night, Dave.
Well, I did have one that night, but it was a broken one, and you have to do something with those cookies. You can't just throw them out. That's right. But it looks like most everybody on the team, and fans and parents and so forth, has had a chance to help you on some given night to keep that project going.
Yeah, it's been a real team effort, and we really appreciate it, and thanks to all the parents, the fans, and faculty members and staff members in the athletic department who've helped us out with that project.
Jenny, before you have to leave us and go to class, why don't we talk just a little bit about the classes and the studying and what you've found, because you've done an excellent job not only on the court but in the classroom as you've joined our program this year. How have you found the classes as you now get to the college level? And
Well, the hours and stuff is a lot different from high school, but like the studying and the way the professors teach, I think that there's not that much difference from Woodland's teachers in the way that they conduct their classrooms.
well, and you've always been a pretty good student, so that helps.
Yeah.
Have you decided on a major?
Right now I'm undecided.
Are you thinking about anything particularly? Do you have 3 or 4 options, or you're just totally exploring at this point?
I was kind of leaning toward public affairs.
Okay.
But I'm not sure.
Well, that's an excellent program here at the campus, as are most of the degree programs, and we hope you'll enjoy the rest of your season this year Somebody said the best thing about freshmen is that they become sophomores. But in a lot of ways, I think, Eileen, your freshmen have already become the veterans with the playing time on this team.
Right. We mentioned that a long time ago in one of our team huddles, that they are no longer freshmen.
We let you be freshmen for a few games, and then you have to be till about Christmas, and then after that you have to be ready to go.
Yep.
But it's been an exciting year, as you say. There've been lots of close games, and some we've been able to pull out, some we haven't. One I particularly remember just before Christmas, we lost with a basket at the buzzer. Yeah. And so those things are happening, and now we'll hope for the second half of the conference season to be the basket rolls in at our end, and we win.
Right.
Well, we'll be right back after these messages.
Of top-ranked men's volleyball this weekend at IPFW. Tickets available at all Ticketmaster locations or call 481-6643.
Welcome back to Coach K's Corner. We've been talking with Coach Eileen Kleinfelder and one of the freshman players, Jenny Newhard. Jenny left us so she could go to class, and we're glad she did that. Not that she left us, but that she's going to class. We had mentioned just briefly in the earlier part, Eileen, a little bit about the conference standings now that we're halfway through after the first round. What are your impressions relative to the conference, the teams at the top? Some regional rankings, I understand, have been achieved by some of the teams.
Right. I'm not surprised at all with Indianapolis being tops in the conference right now at 8-1. I kind of predicted them as being in the top 3 in our preseason poll, and they were a little bit of a sleeper. Other people didn't seem to think that they would do that well, but they have everyone back and from last year, and they're doing extremely well. They have a good inside game and a good three-point shooting attack, and I'm pleased for them. Chuck Mallander's a class act, quality coach, and I'm real happy for him. He's done quite well there. Bellarmine, again, they're 8-1, and Charlie Just has done a tremendous job at Bellarmine, always keeping them right there in contention for first place in the conference. Both of them are ranked in the region, along with Northern Kentucky. And Bellarmine, by the way, is also in the top 20 ranking in the nation. And I'm pleased to see those things happen for our conference schools, because it does nothing but help our conference. You know, it's good to go out when I'm recruiting and tell recruits that our conference is considered one of the strongest in the nation, and we have several times we have teams ranked in the top 20. We popped in there for a short moment last year. But Indianapolis, Northern Kentucky, and Bellarmine, right now all three are in very good contention for NC2A tournament play.
And both Indianapolis and Bellarmine have some key seniors, don't they, in terms of that's helping carry the load for them. And so after a successful first round in the conference, they're going to be very tough with the second round and should get strong consideration for the NCAA playoffs at the end.
I would guess so, and you're right about the senior leadership that they have, and quality ball players, and they have quite a few. When you get 3 or 4 seniors out there with good skills and good leadership, some good things can happen for you.
Right. St. Joe, of course, is behind the two, but yet not so far behind that they couldn't yet get into the picture also. As we said, we had an excellent ball game with them at St. Joe. That's 2 years in a row we played pretty well over at St. Joe, so we've won one and we've lost one. Not too bad.
No, I'm real pleased with our play, at St. Joe. When I first came here last year as a head coach, I heard some of the horror stories and how difficult it is to play there. But I really enjoy playing there. It's an excellent floor, a good crowd. It's noisy.
Enthusiasm is there.
A lot of enthusiasm. The lighting is very good. It's bright and exciting, and I think our kids play well there. And we're fortunate to beat them for the first time last year in school's history. And even though we didn't win this year, I thought we played a very good ball game, and I look forward to having them at home.
And each of the last 2 years in the games over at St. Joe, we've had a pretty good fan following for the ball game. Once they find Rensselaer, why, they're all right. Well, we start the second round of the Great Lakes Valley Conference regular season championships this week. And starting with the University of Southern Indiana and Kentucky Wesleyan, 2 games at home. Your impressions of those 2 teams?
Well, Southern Indiana is a very difficult team to defend. Chancellor Dugan's done an excellent job there bringing in some transfers. This is just her second year. And they have a remarkable three-point shooting attack, one of the best in the conference. They've taken over 400 three-point shot attempts this year. Just last week, they made 10 of 24 in the second half alone against Northern Kentucky to come back from a 17-point deficit to win the ball game by 2. So we certainly have to be out on the perimeter in their face. They have 2 girls shooting over 45% from three-point range, which is incredible. Most players are lucky to shoot that from just the field in general. And then to go along with that, they have 2 solid post players, Kathy Locke, who's averaging 17 points a game and is among the top 10 scoring in the conference, who's going to post you up on the block and trying to defend that, and your weak side help can't be there as well as you'd like it to be, because you have to be out on the three-point shooters. You can't collapse on the ball as much when the ball goes inside, because they'll pitch it back out to three-point shooters. So it's a very difficult team to defend, and you really have to extend your defense.
And I had noticed in this week's statistics put out by the conference that they're also a good free throw shooting team. So
Very
offensively, they have the balance, don't they? They can go inside the three-point shot, free throw line. We're just going to have to hope that we can maybe contain that three-point land and maybe not put them at the line so much tonight, huh?
Right. And I think the other thing, too, is that they have so many three-point shooters. They come off the bench, and you can't just key in on 1 or 2 or 3. You know, there's 3, 4, 5, or 6 people who can shoot the three-point shot, and you really have to be prepared for that. We hope to hold our fouls down. Last year at their place, they're very physical. They this past season here, we went to the foul line a number of times, but did not do well at the free throw line.
Right.
I think we shot about 60%. We hope that we get to go to the foul line a little bit more than they do. As I mentioned, they press for 40 minutes, they play 14 people, and they're very physical, and they are very foul prone. And so I'm hoping that that will be in our favor tonight, that we do get to go to the free throw line quite often, and perhaps get some of them in foul trouble.
I had the opportunity to see that ball game at Southern Indiana earlier in the year, and that too was a good ball game. They had stretched out an early lead, but then our team was able to reduce that lead and actually be in a position late in the game that, with a right bounce or 2, could have won.
Most definitely. I think we were down by as many as 16 points, and at that point, it could have gone to 20 or better. But as has been the case this entire season, we have been down by 15 and 16 points, and continue to plug away and are able to come back toward the end of the ball game and make it a close ball game. And we just aren't able to get over that hump sometimes. We'd like to do that tonight. Getting through their press will be the greatest challenge for us, and I felt we had some unforced turnovers against that last time we played.
I noticed in the statistics also one other interesting feature. I'm not sure it really tells you very much, but any time that Southern Indiana this year has scored less than 70 points, they've lost. So they go up and down a lot, they shoot a lot, they hit three-pointers, so they're a scoring machine.
Right, and we've been keeping, in fact, we were second in the conference in scoring defense. I like to say it's because our defense is so tenacious, and I think we do play some good defense at times, but I also feel, too, that we control the tempo of the game, and that certainly is a goal of ours. Since we play so few people and don't have the depth, we do slow the ball up a little bit and use a 30-second clock and run the offense. And oftentimes, too, that's to our favor, because that's how we draw fouls, make them play defense a little longer.
Now, in contrast, I also had an opportunity to see the game at Kentucky Wesleyan earlier in the season, and they're our Saturday opponent. They don't go quite so much with the outside shooting and not quite as quick up and down the floor, but perhaps a little more physical team.
They're very physical inside. They have 2 very physical post players. I would say that they are very similar to us. They don't have a lot of depth. They don't have 2 or 3 strong outside shooters, especially from three-point range. And Amy Hogan is basically our only three-point shooter for us. So I think that there's some great similarities there. We did beat them by 4 at their place. We were down by 7 at half. Came back and went up by 9. Basically, our plan at halftime was just to get in their face and play a little tougher man-to-man defense. We tried to zone them a little bit first half, and thinking that they wouldn't do so well from the perimeter, but as usual, teams seemed to really shoot well against our zones, and they shot high percentage first half, so we had to go to man second half, and that's what we'll be prepared to do that on Saturday. But it will be a tough basketball game.
Well, Southern Indiana and Kentucky Wesleyan, in both men's and women's basketball in the conference, are two of the more prominent traditional names, and so it's going to be an exciting week to take them on to start at the second half of our season. But we do have them at home this time.
Most definitely, and we were looking forward to this opportunity because we were so close toward the end of the ball game to have a chance at home and to be well rested and having not traveled and played a game that night before. So we think we can give them perhaps a better game. We're hoping to.
Some recent accomplishments by some of the members of the team. I think last Saturday night, again, particularly, Amy Perkins had a tremendous night from the assist standpoint. And was that a team record she set for a single game?
Team record and also career record, school career record for assist. The old record was 11, and she had 13.
And that's something you always want to see, because that means that the unit out there is functioning very well when you're getting lots of assists on the baskets. Seems to me like earlier, perhaps within the last week or so, there was also a record number of field goals made by, was that Lindy
Jones?
Mm-hmm.
She made 16 field goals in our game against Kentucky State, which was a new school record. I ended up with 34 points. She sunk a couple free throws. But, you know, anytime you see something like that happen, and especially with us not having the W's that we want this year, but if you see a player or two able to break a school record here or there, especially with Lindy being so young, and, you know, Amy Perkins is just a junior coming back next year, again, as I mentioned earlier, that's just nothing but encouragement for us. And we have some others who are doing some things. Kim Record is just, I believe, 30 points from scoring 500 points for her career. Michelle Conley's first in the conference in free throw shots.
Shooting.
35 of 41, and she's been on a streak as of late, and so we have some good things happening for some people.
And even though a lot of those things are being done and are attributed to an individual performance, it's really the whole team that's helping each of those players do their thing and capitalize on their strength.
Most definitely, and our team knows that. We have a thing when you do well, if we compliment you, our response is always team instead of thank you, to remind ourselves that it's a team effort, and that's how we're able to accomplish those goals.
As we look at the upcoming conference schedule, the second half, we get, I think, the advantage of playing a little more at home than at the visiting places or on the road. Early in the year, we had a real struggle at home, but we've begun to play much better at home. Is that going to be an advantage for us in this second half?
I hope so. I guess it was pleasing to know that you could play well on the road too, or just as good on the road. But I think we have improved in our home game efforts. It's good to have the crowds out there. It's good to have the double headers with the men, because it does bring a better crowd out for us. And I think the conference play, for some reason, just upgrades things for us. The kids seem to get a little more excited. They seem to play harder. And that's something I talk to them and stress, that we can't just get up for the conference games and for the big teams. We have to get up for every game.
Mm-hmm. And with just one senior this year, and the fact that most of our ball games have been close ball games, even though, as you say, we haven't had quite as many wins as we'd like to have, it's had to be encouraging for the fact that so many underclassmen and are accomplishing and playing good, sound, solid games against some very difficult teams to play.
Yeah, most definitely. We talked about that after the St. Joe game. They'll graduate a large group of their starting lineup, and
thank goodness.
And we'll have everyone back except Amy Hogan, and hopefully, you know, that's going to help us in the long run, especially with our freshmen this year getting so much playing time. And we will have a big recruiting class for next year as well. And only time will tell. We're just going to focus on right now on one game at a time this season, and there's still, you know, a lot to be played yet in the conference, and anything can happen. There are so many teams that are so close, right in the middle of the pack as far as rankings go, and we just want to put forth the effort to try to move ourselves up a few notches in the conference.
And we encourage people from the community, get out and see this exciting women's basketball in the Great Lakes Valley Conference. 5 more home games this season, and they'll all be excellent games. So come out and see the Lady Dons in action starting tonight. Southern Indiana. Thanks for being with us, and We'll be joining you later.